Hello there, welcome to Clinical AI Academy, and this is the 5th round of the Clinical AI rounds. And today we're discussing data drift and model decay. So let's start with the clinical case as usual. Let's say you work in a hospital and it introduces an AI model to detect pneumonia on chest x-rays. At first, the results are great, like great accuracy and consistent. But a few months later, the radiologist starts noticing missed cases or false positives. So the model is telling that there is pneumonia when there is no pneumonia, adding more work or confusing all the clinical workflow. So the question arises, did the model get worse or what happened? So you start wondering what's going on. So this is actually a classical case of what we call data drift. So over time, the input data that a model sees can change. You have different scanners, new imaging protocols, new disease patterns, or even change in patients' population. So when the data shift, the model performance drifts with it. And the downstream effect of that is referred to as model decay, which is the gradual loss of accuracy as the model's assumptions about the world stop matching the reality it's calculating or performing on. So it's not that the algorithm forgets, but the environment is changing, right? With those new variables, the data set, the data that you're testing you're asking the model to perform on is different right now from when you started. So for example, in the case of an imaging, maybe you have the system upgrade, like the PACS upgrade, or maybe you have in EHR-based models, you have like new coding systems, or maybe the documentation patterns that you're using in your department changed. So these changes could be very subtle, but they accumulate over time. And if you're not recalibrating or not monitoring the performance of the model and then recalibrating, so if the model was trained, let's say, on data from last year, silently, you'll be surprised that this year it's starting to underperform. And if you're not keeping track of that, this would be a surprise, and then there will be a lot of issues, like imagine in the case of this pneumonia, then this will add an increase of false positives. This will impact the whole clinical workflow. Like the patient will have to go through extra imaging, will have to go through extra tests, and this will complicate the whole situation, add economical and burden on the patient and on the hospital staff, which is already overwhelmed. So it will really be an issue. So the clinical takeaway for today is, or the take-home message from this round for today, is that clinical AI systems need periodic calibration. So hospitals using AI clinically should have a process to monitor its performance over time, reevaluate the accuracy after software or equipment changes, and if needed, retrain or update the models when data drift is detected. So if you're reviewing an AI paper or product, look for evidence of what is called temporal validation. So was it validated over time, externally, optimally? This is how we know whether the model ages gracefully or not. And this is something that AI tools developers need to make in order to stay compliant with, for example, CA mark, or to be compliant with EU AI Act or the MDR documentation, where it's referred to as post-market surveillance. So after you achieve your CE mark, for example, you need to keep track and to clinically evaluate the evidence that your model is still safe and works as intended and is still as efficient as you are claiming. So it's important to keep in mind that actually AI then does not like stand still. Like if you have your model trained on data from last year then and was performing well, that's not a guarantee that it will keep performing. So you need to keep monitoring it, and performance could fade when data drift happen. So performance could fade if data drift happen, and if you're ignoring that, that's also an issue. So you need continuous temporal validation, and it is like the equivalent of a good clinical follow-up for your systems. So that was the 5th episode of the Clinical AI Round, and I hope you learned something from it. Please let me know what you think, your comments, and see you in the next one.